So some things that we do put us in harm's way of flooding. Land use changes, dams, and then something called urbanization. By cutting down vegetation and covering water-absorbing soil and dirt, grass, things like of that nature, and putting down roads and concrete and houses, urban areas are more quickly prone to flooding. Urban runoff can be 5 times more than pre-urban conditions. Again, soil and dirt can soak up water. So if there's room for water to soak into dirt, it will. Well, if you cover up all that dirt with streets made of asphalt and concrete and houses, you don't have any place for that water to soak in. Therefore, that same amount of rain that may absorb into an open area can't. So, it's 5 times more likely to be flooded in urban areas now than before it was an urban area. Floodwaters are more easily polluted in urban areas. Sewage, just junk that's on the road, oil and whatever else. So floodwaters can easily be polluted, creating a hazard. Again, don't ever play in floodwaters. So with natural groundwater, let's say there's some precipitation, there's some heavy rain. 50% of that soaks into the ground. 40% of that kind of evaporates away or gets sucked up by trees. 10% of it kind of collects on land and runs off. So let's say there's, again, a major precipitation, major storm event. Only 10% of that water is going to run off on the ground, cause flooding. Well, once you change from natural ground cover to 75 to almost 100% impervious cover, roads, houses, buildings, well, look at this. You went from 50% getting soaked in to only 15%. 40% of it evaporating away, 30% of it, leaving 55% of it to run off, stay stagnant, flow off somewhere else, causing a flood. So over 5 times more prone to a flooding event because we urbanized the area. We covered up the natural ground that could soak up that water. So just by doing what we do as humans, we're creating more floods. So we can create more floods and we can put ourselves more in the way by the activities that we do. But can we minimize flood hazards? Can we minimize flood hazards? And if so, how so? Before we do, let me give you part of the super secret code. It is the number 1. Again, it is the number 1. Historically, humans respond to floods by attempting to prevent them through modification of the land. Meaning we make some sort of structure to try and prevent flooding. We build physical barriers. We change the whole shape of streams or rivers. These are some things that we do. We can create physical barriers, including levees, flood walls, reservoirs, stormwater retention basins. So these are some things that we can build to try and hold back floods. So here's a river. I'm assuming that floods a lot because along the edge of this river is a man-made earthen levee. Basically, just a big pile of dirt up here so that if the river does flood, it won't, this mound of dirt that runs along the side of the river kind of keeps that floodwaters back. Stormwater retention basins, that's kind of like what we have in the neighborhoods around us. Those parks that are kind of a little lower in elevation, that's where all the stormwater runoff goes into. The potential benefits of physical barriers are often lost because of increased development on flood-prone areas because people think it's safe. So, there's a big levee here. Let's start moving here. Let's live right next to the river. I guarantee these houses weren't here before this levee was constructed. So it gives people a false sense of security. Now you get more people moving to this area, and when this eventually fails, which it most likely will, once this river somehow gets higher than that levee or breaks and cuts into it, you're going to have so many more people affected. Plus, physical barriers need to be maintained. That costs money. That costs time. But, these things break down. So you can kind of see a cross section. So again, this is not necessarily that same area we were just in, but this is a big earthen levee, a big pile of dirt that they just piled up here to help, keep any floodwaters back. But, the floodwaters, they can eat into these things. So these things have to be maintained. I mean, I saw this picture as I was doing research for this, and I just thought, genius. You know what? This person's like, you know what? I don't trust the government. Oh my goodness. Sorry. I'm putting myself to sleep. Hopefully you're not. This person's like, I don't trust the government. I'm going to make my own levee around my whole entire home. I'm going to flood-proof this whole thing. It seems to work. Seems to work. Way to go, this guy. So, building barriers or something called channelization, where we're straightening, deepening, widening, clearing out, or lining existing stream channels for improved navigation and to decrease flooding. So instead of trying to hold it back, we make these channels for it to go different places. So we're not trying to hold it back, we're just trying to get it to go somewhere else. So the LA River is an example of a great channel that's in Los Angeles County. And it's a big concrete channel that all rainwater that falls into Los Angeles gets kind of funneled into this big channel, which eventually flows out to the ocean. You see a lot of movies filmed down here as well. But yeah, so that's attempting to take all this water and get it somewhere else. Yeah, it looks like this river was along this area, but they decided to just make a new river path to make it all windy, to slow it down a little bit, instead of having a big wide river that might move fast, slowing the river down by, it looks like this newly created channel, could help prevent flooding. So we try. A great option would be, I don't know, just don't live there, don't move there, don't work there, and never swim in floodwaters. So what about the future of flooding in the U.S.? What is that looking like? Well, not good. So more than 4 million houses and small apartment buildings across the U.S. have substantial risk of expensive flood damage. The cost of flood damage to homes nationwide will increase by more than 50% in the next 30 years. All due to climate change, but also, I should say mostly due to climate change, but also a big portion of that due to just more people moving to places that they probably shouldn't. We have more people, our population in the U.S. is growing, well, we got to go somewhere. Well, sometimes those places they get kind of forced to move into are flood-prone areas. The people that are most at risk for some of the more expensive floods are concentrated along the coast due to sea level rise and increase in hurricane and storm activity, and also in Appalachia. So again, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Southern Ohio. A lot of that due to increased storms, increased population, and then moving into places closer to rivers that will flood. Of everyone that's going to be affected, of course, it's going to be poorer people stand to lose the most to flooding as the climate changes and population increases. Poorer people will be affected much more than non-poor people. So where people are at risk for flood damage. So this is a look from 2020. So this is a couple of years ago. Percent of residential properties at risk by county. So broken down, each of those different colors represent a different county of the U.S. And the county in the U.S. that has the highest amount of residential properties at risk for flood damage today was the one I could find that the highest was Cameron Parish, that's what they call their counties, in Louisiana. 95% of all properties that exist there are at risk for flood damage. 95%. You would think, well, okay, yeah, just don't live there. Well, not everyone has that luxury. Not everyone has that luxury. And then you can see Appalachia, or so along the coasts. So the darker the color, the higher the percentage. So again, along the coasts, some of the mountainous areas, but also Appalachia. A lot of change in rainfall, increase in population, river flooding. So you're going to get a lot again in Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina, Southern Ohio, kind of where I went to school at. And then, so flooding is only going to get worse due to population increase and climate change. So then there's a looming insurance disaster in the U.S. We haven't talked about insurance too much. The federal government provides the vast majority of flood insurance in the U.S. It's not a private thing. It's usually by the government. Most policies are underpriced relative to the actual cost of flood damage. So, their policy might only cover $10,000 worth of flood damage, whereas on average it costs $30,000 or $40,000 to fix your house from flood damage. That's just an example. I don't know the exact numbers. But most policies are kind of underpriced relative to the actual cost. So people aren't paying as much. They're not getting as much out of it. So people are putting less money in than is needed to take out. So there's a gap. So if everyone is only, again, I'm just making up numbers, if the policies are underpriced and each resident, or all the residents are paying to the government a total of $100 million a year for insurance, yet there's $200 million in damage every year in the U.S., and that's what the U.S. government insurance is paying out, they're losing $100 million. There's a gap there. So flood insurance rates to catch up would need to more than quadruple, that's 4 times, to keep up with the costs of climate-driven flooding. So, that's going to affect people. When you think about, okay, well, yeah, you can live here, but there are some places where, okay, the government says you can live here, but you need to buy flood damage. Okay. Or flood insurance. Okay. Oh, by the way, it's going to cost 4 times more now. What? Oh, we know you're paying $1,000 a year, now you got to pay us $4,000 a year. Due to climate change and population increase, flooding's only going to get worse. The insurance gap is a looming disaster. So it's going to price some people out of homes. Some people won't be able to live where they historically have been able to live. It's going to cause them to move elsewhere, incurring even more debt for those poorer people. So right now, the National Flood Insurance Program is $36 billion in debt. Again, insurance rates will rise by up to 18% each year until the price is accurate. So they're working on it. So where will flood damage costs will increase? Again, along the coasts for sure, mostly due to climate change. Again, in Louisiana, the cost of flood damage is expected to increase almost 500%, causing on average every single home over $12,000 worth of damage on average. In California, over 268,000 or 268% rise in flood damage, causing on average, this is not the actual cost, but on average, $29,000 of flood damage per household, on average. So, should people be allowed to live wherever they want? Well, it's costing the government money, meaning it's costing you and I money. It's our taxes. Do those same people deserve governmental help if they knowingly live in flood-prone areas? Hey, you live there. This is what you have to deal with. Or do we as Americans say, let's help out one another, or let's help them move, or do something? What would you say? Think about it, because that's the end. I'll see you next time.